Welcome to Recurring Insight. It's the beginning of your upkeep, so it's time for another episode. I'm your host, Michael, and let's dive in. Today we've got a deck discussion, and we're taking a look at Godo. I think that there's a disconnect between what people think of Godo and what it actually is. So we're going to be comparing two different builds. Waiting for Godo by GToast99 and insert clever phrase here, and Wheelie Fast Godo by insert clever phrase here. I want to give GToast, insert, and Ryan from Playing with Power a huge shout out. They sat down and talked me through the deck, so I can't thank them enough. Before we continue, I think a little bit of history here is important. Godo was originally an all-in combo deck centered around Blade of Selves to assemble a conglomeration of equipment in order to combo off. However, with the printing of Helm of the Host, the combo goes down to one card, which means there's a lot more freedom in building the deck. Additionally, you no longer need haste to combo off the turn Godo comes down. Wheelie Fast Godo is the result of insert building a deck reminiscent of the original Godo. That is, an all-in combo deck that goes for turn 1 or 2. It traded almost all of its resiliency to be just a small amount faster than Waiting for Godo, which is still capable of turn 1 wins, but it sacrifices some speed for protection and resiliency. Even after a couple failed attempts, it can keep going for it, which is one of the largest misconceptions about Godo. It's not a glass cannon deck. Wheelie Fast Godo is what most people picture when they think of Godo, which isn't viable, while Waiting for Godo is a slightly slower but more powerful list. Although the focus of the video will be Waiting for Godo, I'll use Wheelie Fast Godo as its foil. Let's start with the combos. The Godo Helm combo works like this. Cast Godo, and with the ETB trigger, find Helm of the Host. Equip it, then move to combat. This will create a non-legendary token copy of Godo with haste. Swing with the token Godo, which will trigger to give you an additional combat phase. Repeat ad infinitum until you get that W. This is the combo that Godo is known for and is central to the game plan. Despite only needing one slot, it warps the deck around it by requiring 11 mana to go off. In order to hit 11 mana early and still be resilient, waiting on Godo is very tight on slots. It's a bonus that this dodges most counterspells and can win through rule of law effects. Wheelie Fast Godo also runs the dual caster combo. We'll use Heat Shimmer as an example. To start, you need a creature on the field. Cast Heat Shimmer targeting the creature, and holding priority, cast Dual Caster Mage, creating a copy of Heat Shimmer. Target Dual Caster Mage with the copy, and keep it going until you have enough to swing in for the win. While this does serve as a backup that only requires one extra card, there are two reasons it isn't included in Waiting for Godo. First of all, as mentioned previously, the slots are incredibly tight. And second of all, Mono Red doesn't have good tutors for Dual Caster Mage. The final combo run in Wheelie Fast Godo is the Breach combo. With Breach, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Wheel of Fortune, you can churn through your deck and mill your opponents out. Waiting for Godo, however, doesn't fill up the graveyard as quickly as Wheelie Fast Godo, so Breach isn't as effective. Additionally, the combo provides a full hand to your opponents, which means your opponents keep getting more interaction. Although not technically part of the Helm combo, let's look at the enablers designed to cut down on the cost of it. We've got 3 that directly equip Helm to Godo. Hammer and Magnetic Theft can also get around Null Rod effects. Cryptic Trilobite doesn't directly skip out on the equip cost, but that is the point of it. These make it into both lists. Heat Shimmer, Panharmonicon, and Twin Flame double Godo's ETB. With the 2 triggers, you can find Hammer of Nazan, followed by Helm of the Host to equip them both to Godo. These make it into both lists and can also get around oof effects. Emergence Zone and Final Fortune only make it into Waiting for Godo. Emergence Zone allows for an end-step Godo before untapping and winning. With Wheelie Fast Godo, the plan is to power him out on turn 1 or 2 and go for the win, which cuts down on the effectiveness of an end-step Godo. Final Fortune is also excluded from Wheelie Fast Godo, and that is mostly due to the ritual density. With a higher amount of rituals rather than permanent ramp, you're more likely to go to your extra turn and not have the mana to equip before losing on your end step. There are a couple cards functionally similar to Final Fortune, but drawing multiples of them is brutal, so they don't make the cut. Alright, now that we've got a handle on that, let's take a look at the removal. Before we do that, I do want to note that the primary point of removal in Godo is to deal with Stax pieces. With the printing of Drannith Magistrate and Opposition Agent, and the shift away from artifact-based stacks, the removal suite has shifted to be more focused on creatures. These 3 spells make it into both decks. Abrade is versatile, hitting both creatures and artifacts, while Pyrokinesis and Thunderclap can be cast for free. These are also the only removal spells run in Wheelie Fast Godo. Waiting for Godo runs a decent amount of sweepers. I'm not going to overanalyze the alternative sweepers and why they didn't make it in, because apparently that's a sensitive subject in the Godo community, so I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Blasphemous Axe cost is dependent on the number of creatures on the field, so it can be incredibly cheap. Starstorm, as an instant, can be cast on an end step, which is a huge boon. You can also use it to deal with an opposition agent or even mind sensor being flashed out. The fact that they can all deal 3 or more damage is important as they hit Drannith Magistrate. Although board wipes are mostly used in other decks to generate advantage over creature-reliant decks, Godo primarily uses board wipes in case the Stax pieces start piling up. This means that having cycling is a huge boon, as you can bin them if you don't need them. Chaos Warp is a little sketchy at 3 CMC, but with mono red, you only have so many options, and it does hit any permanent. Lightning Bolt is pretty standard for mono red. 1 mana to get rid of a Stax piece is a pretty good rate. Godo primarily uses colorless mana, so Mouth of Ronom isn't a huge sacrifice. Shatter Skull Smashing requires 3 life to enter the field untapped, which is a more significant cost considering the power of Treasonous Ogre, but it still has a relatively low opportunity cost. Finally, we've got our Argentum Armor. It can remove 2 permanents each turn and turns Godo into a 9/9 that can attack twice a turn. It can serve as a backup win condition in Waiting for Godo, but it is significantly worse. However, its primary use is serving as universal removal that can be tutored to the battlefield and equipped during the combo. First, use the ETB of 1 Godo token to find and equip Hammer, then swing with it. Even if it dies, you get the extra combat and get to keep Hammer. When the next Godo enters, you can find and equip Argentum Armor. The stack interaction is the opposite of the removal. Wheelie Fast Godo actually runs more stack interaction. It runs 3 copy spells. They make it in not just because they can be used as anti-counter spells, but because of their ritual density. Waiting for Godo doesn't run as many rituals, so the copy spells lose a lot of their effectiveness. They all run the final 5 stack interaction cards. Cavern of Souls makes sure Godo resolves. The deck really likes it when Godo resolves, hence its inclusion. Even though Deflecting Swat doesn't protect the Godo cast for free, that's not a huge deal. The majority of counterspells don't hit creatures, but removal is a far larger issue, and Deflecting Swat can handle that. Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast are expected. Ricochet Trap is similar to Deflecting Swat, except that it doesn't need Godo to be out. Instead, it's effective against counterspells and bounce spells. The card draw is also dominated by Wheelie Fast Godo. Red doesn't have access to too many good card draw spells, but Wheelie Fast Godo runs quite a few to increase consistency. Waiting on Godo doesn't rely on a single fast win attempt, so it doesn't need to run the subpar draw spells. Instead, it just runs the best 4. Harnfell serves as the backside of Burgi. It's not typically the most played side, but in a pinch, it can be a powerful source of card advantage. After a wheel, it's essentially Ad Naus in red. Jeska's Will can serve as either card advantage or ramp. Wheel of Fortune and Misfortune are both incredible. While Wheel of Misfortune hurts with Treasonous Ogre, it's still a wheel for only 3 mana. Waiting for Godo also plays Duretti, which lets you rummage or recur an artifact. Red doesn't have access to a lot of tutors, but Godo makes the best of what it has by using extensive tutor chains. Using a tutor to find a tutor until you can get to the card you actually want. Waiting on Godo and Wheelie Fast Godo run the exact same tutors. Expedition Map can grab protection, recursion, or even removal. Gamble can find anything, and by anything, I mean usually Treasonous Ogre, although you do of course run the risk of discarding what you tutored for. After Ogre, you typically find Crypt, Dockside, Protection, or Recursion. Goblin Engineer can find Protection, Ramp, and Expedition Map. It also doubles as Recursion, which is a nice bonus. Imperial Recruiter will almost always grab Treasonous Ogre, but it can find Recursion, another tutor, or a Stax piece. Finally, Inventor's Fair can grab any artifact, but you do need 3 or more artifacts on the field to activate it. Now we're onto the stacks, and this is where Waiting for Godo really shines compared to Wheelie Fast Godo. Granted, it is a low bar, as Wheelie Fast Godo doesn't run any Stax pieces. There are 2 main categories of stacks in Waiting for Godo. First, there are 3 that attack the mana base. In 3+ color decks, a moon effect can completely shut them down. Karn is a one-sided Null Rod, which is an extremely powerful effect. Also, Karn can recur Helm from exile. Godo is a May ability, so Opposition Agent can't exile Helm, but if you're worried about Praetor's Grasp, this can deal with that. However, you really don't have to worry about Praetor's Grasp. It's either a win con or will be used to steal something they can use to win. The remaining 5 decentivize interaction. Chalice directly counters spells, while Conqueror's Flail is a bad Grand Abolisher, which turns out is still pretty good. Defense Grid and Trinosphere both serve as taxing effects, and Possibility Storm makes it so that their interaction could end up being useless, although there is always a chance that they could hit a different interaction spell. I do want to note that dropping a Defense Grid and passing is a bad idea, B, I, as the next player can combo with protection that you provided. There are a couple of Stax pieces that one would expect to make the cut, but it's important to note that the primary goal of the Stax isn't to slow down your opponents, although some of the pieces are capable of crippling certain decks. The raison d'etre of the Stax in Godo is to force the combo through safely. In case Helm or a key piece is removed, both lists run Recursion. They share the 3 main artifact recursion pieces in mono red. Being a land, Buried Rune has a low opportunity cost. Goblin Engineer is a tutor, and Goblin Welder is cheap. With Engineer, you can't directly recur Helm, but it can find Expedition Map to find Buried Rune. There is only one slot filled with different cards. Duretti can rummage a recur, and has excellent synergy with LED and Jeweled Lotus. Being more expensive, and due to its ability to serve as a value engine or ritual, it makes it into Waiting for Godo. However, Underworld Breach is only run in really fast Godo. The primary reason for this is ritual and card draw density, especially considering the number of which rummage. While Waiting for Godo struggles to fill the yard, the high number of rituals and rummage effects in really fast Godo means it's better positioned to take advantage of Breach and reuse those rituals. Good ramp is vital to Godo's strategy, as you need to hit the magic 11 to win. They share the auto-includes. I'm not going to go over these, as one would be shocked if they didn't make it in. I do, however, want to point out Jeweled Amulet, as I don't think it sees nearly as much play as it should. Treasonous Ogre also deserves attention as an all-star, capable of casting Godo and equipping Helm for 33 life. In the 2020 Oktoberfest Finals run, Godo pilot Kazoo mulliganed to just Mana Vault and Ogre. He top decked a land and got a turn 2 win. Alright, on to the more interesting choices that make it into both lists. Basalt Monolith rarely sees play unless you have a specific synergy with it. Cough cough Kinnan, cough cough. But it does tap for 3 mana. Burgi can provide large amounts of mana, enough that she's capable of making up her initial cost the turn she comes down. Everflowing Chalice, despite its ability to scale, is suboptimal, but Godo needs to maintain a certain ramp density. Honor Worn Shaku is pretty sketchy, but it makes the cut because it can tap for an additional 2 on the combo turn, by tapping Helm and Godo to pay for the equip cost. Infernal Plunge is essentially a bad dark ritual, which turns out is still pretty good. Although Waiting for Godo does run 11 creatures, as a worst case scenario, you can recast Godo, find Hammer, and on the next turn, sack Godo to plunge so you can recast Godo and find Helm. LED costs 0 and can make 3 mana for the equip cost. Rite of Flame is cheap, and while Seething Song is more expensive, for 3 CMC it has a good rate of return. Thran Dynamo makes it into both decks, as 3 colorless is a huge boon. It is more expensive, but unlike the monoliths, it untaps naturally. The main differences are in the fringe rituals. Only really fast Godo runs them, while Waiting for Godo runs more permanent base mana. Soulbright Flamekin is a different matter, but it needs an investment of 6 mana to do anything, and only nets 2 mana, which is not a great rate of return. To fuel the need for more permanent base mana, Waiting for Godo does run 2 subpar artifacts. However, they aren't as bad in Godo, because the deck requires large amounts of colorless mana. There really aren't too many miscellaneous cards. Waiting for Godo runs Direfleet Daredevil and Welding Jar. Direfleet Daredevil can get you just about anything, but it typically ends up reusing a tutor or a cheap counterspell. Welding Jar protects Helm for cheap, and Helm is a little bit important for the deck. Normally, I don't go over the land base, but monocolor decks have more room for utility lands, and Godo isn't any exception. Both decks run the lands that ramp, as there's no opportunity cost, and the payoff for more mana is a win, so it's hard to argue with that. As I mentioned before, Buried Rune serves as recursion, and Cavern of Souls serves as protection. Command Beacon lets you either dodge commander attacks after a failed win attempt, or gets around Drannith Magistrate. Great Furnace, being an artifact, is hit by artifact hate, but the Helm combo doesn't get through artifact hate without help either, so there isn't a huge opportunity cost. The reason for its inclusion is its ability to be sacked to Duretti or the 2 Recursion goblins, and because it turns on Mox Opal. Inventor's Fair, as I talked about previously, is a versatile tutor, and it's easy to hit the 3 required artifacts. Only Waiting for Godo runs Emergence Zone and Mouth of Ronom. I already talked about these, so I won't go over them again. I do want to note the exclusion of fetch lands. With a powerhouse that is Treasonous Ogre, 1 life can be a huge deal to be able to cast a Defense Grid or a Tybalt's Trickery. Additionally, you really don't run anything that requires shuffle effects. I've talked about the playstyle of Waiting for Godo throughout the video, but there are a couple things to go over. First of all, this is not a Stax or control deck. Don't play it like one. If you're mulliganing specifically for Stax pieces, or you're trying to outvalue people, you're probably doing something wrong. It's a proactive deck and one that rewards aggressive mulliganing. Seriously, mulligan hard. You're looking to have a path to victory in your opening hand that doesn't require too many outside cards, as you don't have a great draw suite. For example, let's look at this hand. You've mulliganed to go a Cavern, a Mountain, a Cryptic Trilobite, and Mana Crypt. You've only got 4 cards in hand, but you only need 2 more mana to go for the win. That's fine. Finally, this deck is the definition of linear, so it's insanely important to know when to go off. You need to be able to read the table, and, based off the mana available and what's already resolved, determine if you can make it. For the final section, let's look at the makeup of the decks, excluding the cards solely used for combos. Waiting for Godo runs a higher than average amount of removal and stacks to ensure that it can get the combo through. It does, however, suffer from a lack of card draw, tutors, and stack interaction. The card draw and tutors aren't as much of a problem with a win con in the command zone, and the lack of stack interaction is just a problem inherent to decks without blue. Both decks run a large amount of ramp, but Wheelie Fast Godo invests more heavily into rituals and card draw to fuel its full steam ahead approach. And that's about it. Credit goes to GToast99 and Insert for the decks, and Scryfall for the images. I also want to thank GToast, Insert, and Ryan again. They were incredibly helpful and provided some much needed insight into the world of Mono Red. I highly recommend checking out Playing with Power, as they have great videos and have Godo gameplay. I also want to thank you for watching. We just broke 600 subs, which is amazing. If you have any questions or suggestions for content you'd like to see in the future, leave a comment. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm your host, Michael, and I'll see you at the beginning of your next upkeep for another episode of Recurring Insight.